In this video, I'm going to go over the 5 factors to getting abs, and some of these last ones are things that people don't really talk about and are not that generic. So let's get into this full guide on how to get abs. The first factor is genetics. Now, I don't want to spend too much time talking about this because you can't change it, although it can mainly affect if you have a 4-pack, 6-pack, or 8-pack, or etc., and also the shape of your abs to some extent. But overall, even if you have bad genetics, then you can still get abs that look great. So I would say just don't really worry about it at all. So I'm not going to talk about genetics anymore in this video because you can't change it, so just forget about it. The second factor, and probably the biggest factor, is obviously body fat percentage. Now, generally, if you're somewhat around like 15% or below, then that's when you'll start seeing your abs, although this can differ between everyone basically. And generally around like 10 to 12% is going to be the sweet spot. And of course, if you get leaner, you're going to be able to see them more, but I'm probably around like 12% right now, and my abs look good. Now, if you're already pretty lean and you're already like around 12% body fat or even lower, and you still don't have abs that you're happy with, then it's probably one of the other factors. Now, if you're above 15% and you know that body fat is the issue, then of course you're going to want to go into a calorie deficit and get rid of that fat. Now, I'm not going to talk about cutting fully in depth in this video because I have other videos on that, but I'll just briefly explain how to do it. So the main things that you need to do are going to be to track your weight and your calories, because you need to know if you're actually making progress losing weight, and you need to know how much you're eating to be in a calorie deficit. So basically, track your weight every day and write it down somewhere, and then take the weekly averages and see those for progress. Track your calories every day, and basically if your weight isn't going down, then drop the calories a bit until your weight starts to go down by about 1 pound per week or even slightly more. And then basically just auto-regulate your calorie amount according to if you're making progress on the scale. So if you notice that your weight plateaus and you're not really losing weight anymore, then you would adjust the calories. Now, another thing is cardio. That's more of the calories outside versus calories in, which would be your diet. And cardio is definitely very helpful, especially walking, I would say. Just go for long walks, burns a lot of calories with very little fatigue. And also, I'd say do at least like 30 minutes a day of like actual cardio. The easiest way to implement cardio is honestly just find a sport you like. For me, it's martial arts, and just do that because then it's fun and you get all the cardio benefits. Or you could just go for a run or whatever. Now, let's say you're skinny and you still don't have abs. Like, you're pretty lean, but they still aren't there. Well, then that's probably because of the third factor, which is ab training / ab development. Now, you kind of need to go in order. So if your body fat is too high, then the ab training won't make much of a difference, but you should still be training your abs, even if your body fat is high, to where once you cut down, then you'll see them. But if you just stay at a high body fat and train your abs, it won't make as big of a difference as if you just lose the fat, because that's honestly the biggest factor. So what ab training will do is it will make your abs more visible at a higher body fat percentage compared to if you didn't train them, and also it'll make them look better and just like pop out more when you are lean. Now, ab training is a bit different from what most people think, and I'm sure you already know not to do these 10-minute ab workouts or whatever, get abs in 5 minutes, but for the most part, I don't really train my abs a ton directly, because the thing that a lot of people don't seem to get when they think of getting like a defined midsection or whatever is that it gets hit indirectly through like compound movements. You know, squats, deadlifts, overhead presses. Those all work your core and your abs to stabilize like quite a bit. Now, I still think it's good to do direct ab work. I don't really train my abs directly that much, like maybe only once or twice a week, and I mean, even then, sometimes I just don't do it because like my abs are pretty good without direct training anyway. But if it's a weak point for you, then I definitely think it's good to train them more, like up to 3 times a week or even more. I mean, they can handle quite a high frequency and recover pretty well. So for ab training, all you need really is one crunch variation where you're moving your upper body, and then one leg raise variation where you're moving kind of your lower body and your legs, and then one side bend variation and or a rotation variation for your obliques. And you only really need a few sets for each of those, and you want to kind of treat it a little bit like other muscles, not completely, but definitely more so than most people do. So like, do your reps deliberately, go close to failure, like add weight. Don't just pump out a bunch of sit-ups like for no reason. I'm not totally against doing your abs like with more higher reps and stuff, and just kind of like, not taking it too seriously. But if it's a weak point for you, then definitely take it more seriously. Take your sets close to failure. Treat it more like other muscles, because like whatever's gonna grow, your biceps is also gonna grow your abs similarly, because well, they're both muscles. And obviously you train each muscle slightly differently, but what I'm trying to say is at the end of the day, it's a muscle, so it's not going to grow using a completely different like method than all your other muscles. So what this would look like is you do abs maybe 3 times a week, and the workout would be something like 2 sets of weighted crunches, preferably decline if you can, 2 sets of hanging leg raises, and then 2 sets of like side plank raises, or like a Pavlov press, which is basically just like rotating yourself whilst holding the cable. I would really suggest just keeping it simple like that and not worrying about like every little movement and like hitting every part of the abs dynamically and statically, like isometrics, got the plank and then the side plank raises, crunches, leg raise, Russian twist, this, that, like just keep it simple, choose 3 or 4 and do a few sets deliberately, go to close to failure, and just do that a few times a week. Okay, so those 2 factors are like the big 2 factors for getting abs. Now, let's talk about something slightly different that nobody really talks about that much. Now, what if your stomach is kind of just sticking out, like at rest? You know what I'm saying? Because we're all thinking about abs like when you're flexing. But what about at rest? Because you're not going to be flexing all day, right? What if your stomach is just kind of sticking out? And like, you're not even fat, but you just don't like the way that it just bulges out. Well, this leads into the last 2 factors. So factor number 4, this is going to be bloating. Now, this is basically when you just eat something that your stomach doesn't like, and then all the gases sort of build up and it pushes your stomach forward. Now, the easy answer to this, not thinking too much about, complicating all the mechanisms, just don't eat shit. Like, don't eat shit that makes you feel like shit. Like, you'll know when you feel bloated from something, and if that happens, just don't eat it. Even if like the mainstream tells you it's healthy, like a lot of things like grains, bread, all that, if it doesn't make you feel good, just don't eat it. Like, you can do a very minimalist diet. Like, I've done carnivore before, like you don't have to eat a huge variety of foods, and especially if they don't make you feel good. Okay, so let's say you've thought about all those things. You're lean, you have decent ab development, and maybe they look good while flexing, but your stomach still kind of sticks out a bit, and you kind of have that like belly pooch, even though maybe even in first thing in the morning when you know for a fact you're not bloated. Well, this leads into factor 5, which is anterior pelvic tilt. This is basically when your pelvis is rotated forward, kind of dumped forward. Like if your pelvis was a bowl of water, it would be spilling out in the front, and this is basically just your center of gravity shifting forward. This involves the shortening of your lower back, the shortening of your hip flexors, and the lengthening of your hamstrings and abs. This can be fairly common in people who lift a lot, and I definitely have it to some extent, and I'm trying to fix it. But especially kind of when your lower back gets compressed, like for me, when I deadlift a lot, it gets kind of tight, and your center of gravity gets pushed forward because you're getting that compression on the back side of your body from lifting. And then basically, if you think about it, like your lower back is kind of compressed, that's pushing all of your viscera and literally just all your organs and fluid in your stomach that's supposed to be there. It's just pushing it forward. So that's why it looks like your belly is sticking out, but it's literally just your organs and your viscera. Like, it has nothing to do with fat or anything really. Now, this can have a whole lot of other problems, but if we're just talking about your abs and just your midsection in general, like looking aesthetic or like lean or defined or whatever, then it can definitely affect it. And not only will it make your midsection look kind of unaesthetic because your belly's sticking out a bit, it just kind of makes your posture not look that great either. Now, if you have maybe tried to search for answers on anterior pelvic tilt, like I have, then what a lot of people say is not going to work, because a lot of people tell you, oh, well, tight hip flexors, tight lower back, weak hamstrings, weak abs, right? So therefore, you should stretch your hip flexors, right, and your lower back, and strengthen, train your abs and your glutes and hamstrings, right? But I tried all that and it does not work, because what they're doing is they're not actually asking why those muscles are tight or weak in the first place, because really they're not. The muscles, so the lower back muscles and the hip flexors are in a relatively shortened position, but that's because of the actual anterior pelvic tilt, because your body's basically just compensating for your center of gravity being pushed forward because of the posterior compression. So basically, like, the muscles, they're not really tight, they're just concentrically oriented, which means they're just in a shorter position because of the structure. Same with the abs, they're in a more lengthened position because of the way that the pelvis is oriented. Doing some of those things like stretching and strengthening might work, but it didn't really work for me, and there's honestly more simple things that you can do in less time that like actually address more of the root cause. A few movements that I like are one where it's kind of like a 90-90 hip lift. So basically you're laying on your back with your feet on the wall and your knees and your hips are 90 degrees. And what that's doing is basically putting you into kind of the opposite position, more of a posteriorly tilted position. And this is going to be creating more expansion in the right areas. And you want to make sure you're taking good breaths in, not using your neck to breathe, and kind of feeling even expansion through your body. Another one is just kind of like a wall sit, but kind of high up, so not really like a full wall sit. But basically the common theme here is, your legs are kind of in front of you so that you have room to basically posteriorly tilt more. One that I also really like, just in general, help you with squats or anything, it'll just make you kind of feel better, is a ramp elevated goblet squat. And it has to be on a ramp, not elevated with plates under your heels, because that actually pushes your center of gravity forward. But when you're on a ramp, it pushes your center of gravity back, which is what you want. If you want to learn more about these movements like in detail, then check out Bill Hartman. That's where I got this ramp elevated goblet squat from. Basically, you inhale at the top and then exhale as you're going down, and then once you reach the sticking point, kind of like the middle, then you stop, and then you start inhaling down below that into the bottom. And since you're holding the weight in front of you in a goblet squat position, that's actually going to push you even more back, which is a good thing. Yeah, and the key with all these is the breath, because that's what's actually going to create the expansion in those areas. But yeah, I mean, there are some better resources if you want to learn about it more. And like I said, Bill Hartman, for sure, check him out. So the most important things to focus on when trying to get abs is, number one, the body fat percentage. That's definitely the most important if you are sort of above it. If you're around 15%, try to get a bit leaner, but once you're at about 12, then you basically check that one off. And the second thing is going to be the ab development. You should be doing this anyways, whether you're 12% or 20% body fat. Either way, you should be training them. But those are like the two big factors. Although the third one, the bloating and the anterior pelvic tilt, if those are issues for you, then I would say to address those, but they might not be. And also if you already did the other stuff. I mean, if you're worried about bloating, but you're like 30% body fat, then I hate to break it to you, but no amount of debloating is gonna make those abs show under that thick layer of fat. But really you should be doing kind of all these things at once, but just realize, like, let's say you're like, you have a lot of body fat. Let's say you're like 20 or 30%. You should still be training your abs. You should still be eating good food that makes you feel good. I mean, that's regardless. And addressing the postural/structural issue of anterior pelvic tilt. But at the end of the day, you got to realize that the body fat is what's holding you back. Now, one thing to realize is that the thing about bloating and anterior pelvic tilt, they won't affect as much your abs when you're flexing and like the actual look of them, but it's more so about just like your stomach sticking out in general, which I guess is another issue that is not really talked about either. Because most people just talk about when you're flexing, but there's not much out there on how to make your stomach stick out less when you're relaxed, but you're already lean. And obviously, consistency and just patience are important as well. And just know that whoever you are, you can get abs that look really good as long as you just put in the work for long enough. But yeah, that's it for this video. Have a good one.